thank you so much for blocking time today to participate in our first ever webinar and for your involvement in the Catalyst community. As we are all aware, it's a changed world from that which we had perhaps taken for granted just a few months ago. And in many ways, we may find ourselves asking new questions about what is important to us, to our families, and to our communities. In some ways, we may also be questioning how we can have an impact while it appears that so many things are beyond our control that are front and center in our society today. Recognizing that we must start from within, it is evident that the time is right for a discussion regarding integrity. Fortunately, my childhood friend Dave Keenest, who is a talented life and transformation coach, is happy to help lead us through a presentation on integrity today. Dave will share stories throughout the discussion to help us embrace the hallmarks of integrity and understand that living with integrity will help us bring both purpose and productivity to our personal and professional lives. Before we start off, there are a couple of administrative items for us to address. As Dave's mentioned, as people have been logging in, everyone is encouraged to ask questions throughout the presentation. And to do so, just use the Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. You can free type questions and then hit send, and they'll be on Dave's screen right away. So he's accustomed to delivering these presentations in person. This is a kind of a new venture in terms of delivering this presentation via webinar, so don't be afraid to ask questions anytime. He's very happy to field them live, and then whatever we can't get to in the moment, we'll definitely address as we close out the discussion. And then also, Dave's going to provide everyone with a copy of the slide deck that he's prepared following the presentation, and the webinar will be recorded and posted on both the Catalyst Group website and the Keenest Coaching website. So without further ado, Dave, thank you for joining us today. The screen is yours.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Thank you. Thanks a ton for having me, man. It's really an honor to be connecting with you. And I wanted to actually acknowledge you, Kevin. I've known Kevin K since 1980. I've known Kevin K since first grade. And Kevin was a stand-up guy in first grade. You know what I mean? And you can think about those people as you go back. And the conversation, this is all about integrity. Right? Integrity, it really just comes down to, like, there's an aspect of character to integrity, and there's an aspect of you giving your word to yourself and to others, and honoring that word. And there's a lot of power available in such seemingly simple things. And so, Kevin, thank you so much for putting this together. Speaking of integrity, I mean, the reason this thing happened is because Kevin and I gave each other our word that we would make it happen. And it's true, we're in this Zoom world. We're all of a sudden in this Zoom world. And so having to figure out and make the adjustments, regarding what has to happen in order to keep things moving. This technology was this sort of thing I was avoiding, and this sort of necessary, it's no longer a necessary evil. It's actually turning into this sort of fun, challenging, and new endeavor. So thanks again, man. It's really great to be here. And, the name of the presentation, the webinar, whatever it is you'd like to refer to it as, is Productivity and Purpose, Living with Integrity. And then this is just the power of accessing your own inner resources. I'm going to explain what that means, and hopefully we'll make it abundantly clear by the end of this. This is brought to you by, my name's Dave Keenest. This is brought by Keenest Coaching. You can find Keenest Coaching on Facebook. Then there's davekeenest.com. My sort of alter ego is magicpisces.com. It's all me. At the end of the day, it's just all me. I have two websites. I'll maybe explain a little bit of that, but it's really about, what is the ultimate, it's just like the ultimate expression of who I am and why I exist on this planet. And I'm going to pose these sort of questions to you, like, what are you doing here as we move along? And there we go. Technical difficulties already. So just to sort of illustrate where I'm at, right? It's, and hopefully to have you guys take a look. I threw this one in at the last minute. So you have your comfort zone, and you have where the magic happens. And this is like one of those things, if you're on social media, if you're on Instagram, if you're on Facebook, a meme like this might come rolling through your feed, and you go, oh, that's great. I like that. I'm going to hit like on that. But it can be a lot easier said than done. And the thing that's going to connect your comfort zone with where the magic happens, what's going to make you be able to realize amazing things in your life, is just your word, right? You saying you're going to do something is actually it's a very powerful force in seeing that things actually happen in your lives and your businesses and your relationships and everything. It's really all about your word. I gave my word to Kevin. Kevin gave his word to me. Then we had this like crazy, weird Zoom thing to figure out. And I should have just done a Zoom meeting. I signed up for Zoom webinar, and then there's this whole new set of problems, but that I was kind of forced to figure out. And you'd be really amazed at what happens when you throw yourself into the middle of something without really knowing how it's going to go. And that really is where the magic happens. It leads you somewhere. It leads you somewhere that it's meant to lead you. So if you kind of follow along with me, raise your hand there. I want this to be a little bit interactive. So again, feel free. There we go. All right. Kimberly and Tony, I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Maria. All of you, appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to interject them or to ask them. I'll try to get to them. So the structure and intention real quick. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell you exactly who I am. I'm going to share a little bit of my gnarly past, get permission to be exactly who I am. I'm going to define integrity. I'm going to introduce integrity as something that you can start tweaking right now. So like the intention of this is for you to create, to cultivate some awareness in you that you can apply immediately. You could very literally take this concept and change one, if not various aspects of your life before midnight. I mean, it's 4 o'clock in Chicago. You could change your life here in the next few hours. And I'm not exaggerating at all. I'm going to share a miraculous case study / story of this client who I work with personally, just to kind of tie it all together with story. I'm going to define resistance. And again, just provide you with something immediate that you can apply. So follow along, do yourself a favor. You actually might be watching this on a cell phone. And if you are, you can't turn off your cell phone, maybe agree to not answer texts or something. But if you're on a computer, turn off your cell phone, get engaged, learn something. I really want this to be applicable knowledge. This stuff isn't really theoretical. You can apply this stuff immediately. So if you got a pen, if you got access to a pen, if you're not in your car or wherever, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper. If you want, grab a drink, preferably non-alcoholic. But again, get engaged. And I'll just give you a second there. If you got something to write, as soon as you got something to write on, go ahead and raise your hand. All right. We have an enthusiastic group. Awesome. I like it. Cool. So, so who am I, right? So if you get into a conversation with me, you're going to find out within about anywhere between 30 seconds and 2.5 minutes that I'm a surfer. My life, I exist to catch the perfect wave. That's what my whole life is about. That's a huge part of my life. It exists for that specific. I exist for that purpose, right? And if I've got something that meaningful to me, I need to create my business around that pursuit, if that makes sense, right? And I'm a coach. I've been coaching people for a very long time. I live in Southern California. I grew up in Chicago. I miss Chicago every day. I spent 9 winters riding my bike through the streets of Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. In Chicago, I went through, without question, one of the most brutal, gnarliest, most grotesque battles with addiction a person could ever possibly go through. On June 16th, 2007, I was curled up in the fetal position in this publicly funded detox center on the far north side of Chicago. And I had just completely and totally destroyed my life and tore it down into a million pieces. And it was like this fractured shell of a human being was like staring back at me. And it was sort of like this experience of like God was above me and the devil was below me. And the devil was just, he just wanted me. He just, come here, Dave. It was that kind of a situation. And it just really, it tested my spirit in a very particular way that a spirit can be tested. And there are very few things that a human being can go through that provide that person with that arduous of a journey. It's kind of like a gnarly type of a hero's journey. And from the floor of that center, right, I made a decision that I was going to change everything. I'm the only white kid in this like gnarly, like infested place, right? Just surrounded by vice and crime and, police. And it was just this horrible existence. And there were probations and court cases and Cook County Jail. And it was just gnarly. It was just this gnarly existence, right? And one day I decided, like, I'm going to turn this all around. Like, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. I'm going to turn this around. And, I use this is my toothbrush. This is actually a detail car brush, right? But car detailing brush. But like the first thing to do to begin putting my life into integrity was just to pick up a toothbrush. And it was just kind of like this, like what have I done? And what do I do to get out of this mess? And one day at a time, like, it just started to work out. Like, it just started to work out quickly with the appropriate support structures in place. And as a result of that, I discovered this love of surfing, right? I started surfing in the winter times in Lake Michigan. You can actually surf on Lake Michigan, and it's always in the cold months. And I fell in love with the pursuit. It was this deep love, and I actually grew up skateboarding with Kevin. I was a skater and then I was a snowboarder, but the surfing was like the ultimate board. And it just took me on this journey, right? And I fell so in love with it. And that then led me, to live this life that I live in California, right? I moved out here about 4 years ago. But the reason I share that with you is because I'm living proof that anything is possible for any human being. Like, anything. I truly believe that. And my job is really, it's to help people identify their deepest longings, the things that they care about the absolute most in their life, and to go after them. And really, that's what coaching is all about. You know what I mean? Coaching is about supporting someone in becoming the most amazing, most badass, most fully expressed version of who they truly are. And that's why I like entrepreneurship so much, is because I really see it as a spiritual quest. It's like this, it's a quest to discover something about the nature of yourself and ultimately the nature of reality, right? So thanks again for being here. You can listen to my podcast, one called Addiction and Redemption. I tell the entire story in all of its gory detail. That one's not on iTunes, but I got the Magic Pisces podcast. It's just me waxing philosophical on, just about everything. Lately, it's been, you can't really avoid the political situation lately. So I try to address everything through the lens of spirit, through the lens of something greater, through the lens of what is there to learn in all of this, through the lens of, like, is there a way that's less polarizing, right? And I call myself a rebel ontologist. Does anybody know what ontology is? Raise your hand if you know what ontology is. 0. No worries. Nobody ever does. Ontology is the study of being. And I'm actually an ontological, hello. Someone raised their hand, but I missed your name. All good. Ontology is actually the study of being. Thanks, Anna. So I work with the way that people are being. So I relate to myself as a rebel ontologist. So again, thanks for being here. And so again, I do what I do. My job, the reason I do what I do is because I believe anybody can do anything they want, like, for real. No joke, no shit, no kidding, as we say in the business. So I want everyone to actually write that question down for themselves. Like, who am I and why do I do what I do? And then raise your hand when you've answered that question. Who am I and why do I do what I do? Feel free to answer. If you want to answer in the question box, you can. And these are questions that we never ask ourselves. Like, this is a question that we never ask ourselves. Who am I? Like, what is this all for? Right? Who am I and why do I do what I do? So I want to briefly just cover or talk about what coaching is. So this is Tom Landry's definition or description of coaching. Dallas Cowboys coach, led them to Super Bowls. Is that a coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear, who has you see what you don't want to see, so that you can be who you have always known you can be. And that's really the job of a coach, is to show you, say things to you no one else will say, and to have you see things that no one else will see. So that's very often, that's a huge part of what I do, is creating awareness with human beings. Question real quick. That's a good question, Christopher. Thanks. Christopher's asking, I am a very creative individual that happens to work in the accounting field, and I do that to survive and put food on the table. I totally get that, and we will address that here in a little bit. Thanks for sharing, and thanks you for participating. We're going to talk about the problem, right? So the problem is that we become addicted to what is familiar, right? So that comfort zone, what that really is, it's an addiction to familiarity, right? And so the reason I shared sort of the dramatic story of some of the stuff that I went through 13 years ago, it's just to illustrate that addiction, I was really just caught up in a very familiar world. It was this bubble. I created this bubble around me, right? And I became addicted inside of that bubble. And for a while, I had absolutely no awareness about how simple it was to get out of it, right? So we get stuck, we get addicted and stuck with what's familiar, and then we have no awareness around how simple getting your life into integrity can be. And then we also have no awareness around the fact that the only resource that you need is yourself. So all you need is you. Like, this is why I use the analogy of a swimmer. So a swimmer, like, all a swimmer does is get in the water and swim. Like, it's just basically their body that they're working with. Like, they might go to the gym and lift a little weights here and there, but basically they're in a pool swimming, right? And they're just using what is given to them as a resource to make themselves very powerful and very strong. And, you know, a gnarlier example I like to use is like a prison workout. Like these guys go in prison and all they have are pull-up bars and push-ups, right? And they come out incredibly strong if they choose to work with the resources that are available to them. And so that's really kind of how integrity is. And I'm gonna present you with some examples as to how you can work with this stuff immediately. But I want to define integrity. So the dictionary definition, there's two. I like the second one better, but the first one is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles and moral uprightness or moral uprightness. I do not like to, I don't like to equate morality with integrity. We don't use morality in coaching. I do like the second definition. It's the state of being whole and undivided. So just ask yourself currently, I want to put another thing in. The beautiful thing about integrity is that it's not good, bad, right, wrong. It's not ethical. It's not moral, even though dictionary definition number 1 says that it is. We do not relate to it as moral or ethical. We relate to it as access to power. And so, like, right now, just ask yourself, where in your life are you divided? Like, what is not working? And by the way, no one's ever 100% in. There's always something that could be shifted around, always. There's always something that is out that could be put in. But just ask yourself, what is divided? Like, what's not working? So what is the scandal in your life that you need to handle? You know, in places, very common places to look. Does anybody want to answer with what a common place to look here might be? Like, what's a common place in life where someone might be divided or out of integrity? Romances and finances are two very common ones. But the working definition, which is Gandhi's definition of integrity, is when your intentions, your words, and your actions are all aligned. So Gandhi, right? Gandhi basically had an intention, and the intention, I believe, was downloaded to him. I believe it came from God. I believe that it came from something greater than him. But his intention was to rid the country of India of British rule. That was his intention. And then he had to speak that. He had to declare that. He had to make that known to an entire country of people. And then he had to align the actions with the intentions and the words. So we're really good at getting intentions all over the place. We're really good at coming up with great ideas. We're really good at being creative, right? Or having creative ideas, but when you align your words and your actions with them, it gives you access to power. And so the way that you create something, it's by aligning your intentions, your thinking also rather, your words and your actions. So raise your hand if you kind of get that. Raise your hand if you can wrap your head around that. Thanks, guys. You know, we got an engaged audience. I appreciate you guys enormously. So right now, I just like ask yourself, what are your words? Like, are you currently doing what you say you will do? Like, what are the promises that you are making to yourself and others? So, you know, I mentioned transformational shifts by the end of the night. Like, you can right now, and you don't need to declare this to anyone except yourself. You can make a promise to yourself regarding something that you will complete or something you will do before the end of the night. And that thing, right, will result in a different version of yourself. Right? That could be, I'm not going to have any beers tonight. That could be, I'm going to bring up that thing with my partner that I've been avoiding bringing up. I am going to cook dinner instead of having dinner cooked for me. They're endless. The possibilities are endless. Yeah, I had a client I worked with, his entire journey of personal transformation started with him making coffee for his wife every single day for a week. That was it. That opened the door for so many things to unfold in his existence. He just made a promise to himself. He didn't promise her because she was used to his promises. His promises didn't go far. He made a promise to himself and he decided to be his word. So you don't need to start with these gigantic reinvention types of things. You can start with very simple things. So consider making a promise to yourself and honoring that promise. And it doesn't need to be today. It could be something that you take on in the next few days or in this next week or even in the next month. But be your word, right? So 4 areas of integrity, and I'll email you guys the interlocking web of integrity. I kind of created this around that. I was told it was a little bit too complicated. So I'll email that over to you guys later. But there are integrity of relationships. So you want your personal relationships empowered. So do you get along with your friends, basically? Do you get along with your neighbors, right? Your professional relationships in integrity, right? Your familial relationships, you want those in integrity. Tribal, what I refer to as tribal relationships are like, that could be like church, or if you're a member of a 12-step group, or maybe you're a member of a men's or a women's group. Maybe a book club could be a tribal relationship. It's a group where you're not necessarily friends, but you share a common bond or a common cause, something that keeps you in relationship with one another. A lot of people, actually, we sent out a survey. A lot of people were really concerned regarding the integrity of their vocation. So are you aligned in your career? And I want to speak to that for a second. COVID dropped a great big bomb on the entire world, right? It just came in and it created this circumstance that seemed to be, in a lot of ways, insurmountable, right? And I saw that those of us who chose not to give our power away to that circumstance, to not let that circumstance dictate how things went for us, are just fine. Right? So it comes back to the definition of integrity, Gandhi's definition. So if you are having, struggles in your career, right, vocational challenges, get clear on what your intention is. What is your intention there? What will you create? And then align words and actions accordingly. I mean, it goes back to the story of me and my addiction. Like, I was 8 months sober. I had just gotten off Cook County probation, and I got a 6-figure job working for a software company off Craigslist. That came as the result of my integrity. Like, I had been living with integrity. I'm walking a very narrow line for only 8 months. And those are the kind of results you can see when you start to make these drastic changes. Integrity of being. So there's physical well-being, your body. There's emotional well-being, your emotions. And then I think that everybody, this is my personal opinion, some sort of spiritual relationship to the universe, some sort of relationship with something that's bigger, greater, vaster than you. You don't have to call it God. It's great if you do, is only going to serve you, right? And just the willingness to entertain the prospect that something might be there is enough. But, I'm not here to force anything on you. That's just a place to look. if you've got a spiritual connection, if you go to church, like what is the reason that you're going to church for? You know, is it to endure something? Is it because somebody's making you, or is it to connect with something? So these are just places to look. And again, we're talking about power. We're not talking about morals, right? And then finally, like time is the best one. So, excuse me, or one of the simplest ones. Raise your hand if you're habitually late or you know someone who's habitually late. Yep, there we go. There we go. So you can change your entire life. If you're a late person, we have a saying in coaching. When you're late, it's screw me or it's screw you, right? So if you're constantly late, ask yourself, are you sort of disrespecting the person who you're supposed to show up for, or are you disrespecting yourself? So this is one of the funnest challenges I can present to people who have challenges with time. Start being on time right now. Just be on time. Don't be late anymore. Don't be late. And if you want to double whammy with that, don't be late and drive the speed limit. Don't be late and drive the speed limit. That in and of itself will provide a completely and totally transformed experience of what it means to be alive. Because the way that we relate to time, it kind of segues into using time wisely. So if you're on time, great, right? Then start using time wisely. So one of the biggest time wasters in the entire universe currently is social media. And you can just see all these people not only are they wasting time, but they're participating in this, and I'm guilty of this, by the way, participating in this great big, you know, who knows what experiment with everything, right? So just that, being on time, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, very, very simple stuff, but it can be completely and totally transformational in nature. So if you want to accept that challenge, feel free. So these are just a few areas. There's a lot more, but these are kind of what I'm going to focus on. I want to talk about, give me a second, I got a question. I worked at a company that they would kick you out if you didn't show up on time. I was at a meeting where the president of North America was kicked out. That is when I knew it was real. Yeah, straight up. There was this guy I worked with at a software company, and he would saunter in 5 minutes late every day with the same excuse. And he was basically telling the entire office that he was more important than everybody else. You know what I mean? And he got fired. You know, and I thought he should have been. It's one thing if you got like a legit excuse. If you're late, if you're on time every day and then you're late, then you get a little leeway. But anyway, so what exists between out and in? So what exists between when we're out of integrity and getting into integrity? And we call that resistance. So resistance is the enemy. Resistance is the thing that will tell you to go to the bar when you just decided to stop drinking, right? Great definition of resistance. I call it the enemy. Again, it's a self-generated conversation to talk you out of integrity. I put diets in there in parentheses, right? So I swear off donuts almost every single week. And then I get done surfing on Saturday, and the last thing I need is a donut, but the first thing I want is a donut. And this ingenious little thing goes on inside of my head that, like, it's almost like I'll subconsciously drive past the donut shop, right? That's resistance. Resistance will subconsciously have you take different routes, right, home to pass you by your temptations. Resistance very often, I've seen technology go to shit, excuse my language, when someone's up against something big. Very often when I'm in a really breakthrough conversation with a client where we're like right in a spot where their entire existence is sort of resting in the balance, the phone cuts off. Excuse me, resistance is genius. And again, it will try to talk you out of getting into integrity. So I'm going to write that book. Oh, it's a beautiful day. I need to go, you know, surfing, honestly. So resistance is the thing to keep your eye on, right? And that's why we want to come back to the power of our word. So is everybody following me so far? Am I going too fast? Raise your hand if you're kind of following me. Thanks, Kim. Oh, you guys are great. That's an incredibly attentive audience, as I've said before. So costs of being out of integrity, right? So in your relationship, if you're out of integrity, so I'm gonna bring up a taboo word, affairs. They happen all the time. I talk to so many people that find themselves in them. They just sort of happen, right? But through the lens of integrity, like, it's just a power leak. It's really just an opportunity, because I've seen so many come back, right, stronger than ever as a result of the slip, right? But first you got to look at the cost. Like, what is the cost there? What is the cost? And if you take it out of romantic relationships, what is the cost of you allowing yourself to stay angry at your mother or father because of what they didn't say to you when you were 12? What's the cost of that? What's the cost of that resentment, right? What's the cost of not saying the thing to your partner that you've wanted to say for years, but don't have the courage to, you know? I mean, speaking of courage, you know, I've shared some of the most terrifying things I've ever done. We're sharing things with, you know, personal things with a partner. You know, that makes the biggest wave I've ever surfed seem like absolutely nothing, right? But that's an integrity conversation, and resistance has a say in it. And then look through the lens of physical health. Like, what is the cost of not having that part of your life work? Like, what is your physical health being out of integrity costing you? And then, you know, career. It's so funny. I talked about the cost of career when I was working at the software company, the one I mentioned, and it was just like I had to answer to this dude named Pete, you know, and I would wake up in the morning and I would just see the waves on Lake Michigan, and I would not want to go to work, right? Because you don't get that many on the lake, and I was so sick of answering to Pete, right? And Pete's working for some other software company. He's worked himself up, right, in the industry or whatever. But for me, it became a matter of integrity. Like, it didn't align with who I was. And so that's why I had to sort of launch into an entrepreneurial journey. And then, time. Like, what are the costs of being late? Like, or what are the costs of not, you know, not using the time, the infinitely, or the minuscule amount of time that we have here on this planet? What are the costs of not utilizing that to the fullest? Does anybody want to share? Raise your hand if you understand the costs. Sweet. Yeah.
So Dave, this is Kevin.
Kevin.
Just curious, when you're working with clients and helping them kind of through this process of recognizing the costs and then dealing with the fear of the fallout of being in integrity, how do you help them kind of make that leap of faith?
Well, I mean, you use the exact word, right? Because I didn't speak to it in this, excuse me, I didn't speak to it in this presentation, but there's a relationship between integrity and trust. So, meaning when there's something that's out of integrity in your life, like say there's a relationship thing, right? There's something that you've been wanting to say to your partner, but you don't, right? You're actually afraid of the unknown there. That's what's going on. And so it begs this, you know, I believe in God. I just use the word God. It begs the question, do you trust God or do you trust the universe? That if you say the thing or do the thing that most aligns with who you are and what you're committed to in life, that it will work out the way it's supposed to. The way that it's supposed to may not necessarily be the way that you want it to, but very often people find that it works out for the better. You know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, definitely.
Yeah. There's a relationship between integrity and trust. Right? It's kind of like if your car needs spark plugs and an oil change. This isn't the best analogy, and you make the necessary adjustments, you're gonna be able to trust your car better. That's not a perfect analogy, but you could trust that the universe will get you right to where you want to go faster, I guess. Yeah, so I like it. Somebody's chiming in saying they need to enforce integrity right now. So we don't want to turn it in. Thanks for seeing that. Thanks for getting it, right? But the beautiful thing about this is, like, even if there is something that's drastically out, it doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean you're a horrible person. It just means that you're leaking power, right? I'm actually there's a relationship conversation I'm gonna use this example to sort of tie it all together. This is a client of mine. I'm using him with his permission. I want to be crystal clear about that, right? But this guy, Bob, right? This is Bob now. I'm going to show this before and after picture later. I'll explain why. But this is Bob now. He's an International Coach Federation certified coach. And I've been working with him off and on for many years. And he came to me about 4 years ago, and he just wanted to make a change. He just didn't know what was wrong. He wanted to make a change, right? And he was really good guy. I'd known him for years. And I noticed that he was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes late for every call. And it was interesting. I just got curious about it. What's up with this, Bob? You're a smart guy. Why are you always late? And I asked him, is this F me or is this F you? What's going on here? It didn't seem like he was disrespecting me, because sometimes people will test you. And he said, well, my girlfriend, she always, every time I need to do something, she blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, it's not just for these calls, right? Does this happen at other places? And he's like, it happens all the time. It makes me late for work. It makes me late for appointments. It makes me late for this. It makes me late for that. And that time reflection, that question about time, opened up a conversation about the nature of his relationship, right? So all of a sudden, we're in this conversation about the nature of his relationship and the fact that it wasn't working for him, right? And he'd been living with this girl for 7 years, and he had become very much addicted to what was familiar, right? So nothing wrong with it. It wasn't really bad. It wasn't really good. It was just kind of sauntering along, right? And he came to the conclusion relatively quickly that that he had to end it, right? So he did, right? And he went through the grieving process, and then that cleared the way, right, for him starting to ask himself who do I want to be with? Because he attracted that person by default without asking or being clear regarding who it was he wanted to be with, right? And that opened the door for 9 months later. He met this woman. Shauna is her name. You might recognize these people, by the way. But so they get married. I mean, about a year after that, they got married, I think maybe a little under 2 years ago, when they conceived a child, right? And then just about 2 months ago, her water broke. Three months ago, something like that. Her water broke at 20 weeks, right? And the baby's life was put in danger. He was given actually between a 1% and 5% chance of living. So this is in the middle of COVID, and he can't go see her. He's banned from the hospital. So from integrity, right? He starts showing up outside the hospital, right? So honoring his time, honoring his relationship, honoring his fatherhood. He's created a career where he can work whenever he wants. So it's very flexible, right? His health was in whatever. He was working on that too, right? But he starts having these date nights at the hospital, right? And then the news picked it up. So WGN picked it up, and then CBS picked it up, right? And then Good Morning America picked it up. And the last I heard, he was on the Tamara Hall show 2 days ago. And this is the miraculousness that unfolded. So talk about the relationship between trust and integrity, right? This entire situation, he ends up inspiring the world, because it totally went viral. Some of you might have seen it, but he ends up inspiring the world, right? And it all started with a conversation about, why are you late? Why are you late? Because my relationship sucks. Okay, you want to take care of that? Yes. Now what do you want? This is the type of person I want. In the meantime, this guy was actually he had a 6-figure career in the healthcare industry. He was an executive in the northern suburbs for a big healthcare conglomerate. He was very powerful and he was very successful, but he was doing this is him before. I'll show you in a second. He was doing the wake up in the morning, slam a couple of Red Bulls, smoke cigarettes, and drive to the northern suburbs and just doing the deal. He's making $150,000 a year, but at the end of the day, he was totally unhappy with himself. So, he ended up going through the same coach training program I did, which is called accomplishment coaching, which is very, very thorough training. And that's sort of what can happen, right? This all just started with integrity of time. You're late, dude. What's up with that? Right? And now you've got this sort of inspired the world type of situation now. if you work with a coach, for me, I can't guarantee that you'll end up on TV, but you never know. And it's so funny because this is his before and after. This is before he became a coach, but you can just see the being of the guy on the left. That's the guy who hired me, right? He's just like, what's going on with that guy compared with the guy on the right, right? And then he evolved beyond that to be this like really full expression of who he is. And this is all about like him just making promises to himself. That's it. He just started to be a different word. And he started to call out the familiar. That's familiar. That's comfortable. I choose something different, right? So now he's got this life of his deepest longing, and the baby's due actually in 2 weeks. And I mean, we're convinced like this is integrity that has, you know, spiritual in particular, right? Because there's so many prayers going on for this little kid. Send some prayers out to Forrest if you can, right? But that's kind of the power. So this story sort of illustrates the power of it all. So, you know, what can you do, right? Pick 3 areas or pick 10, right? But just make a list. Like this doesn't need to be this great big hullabaloo. You just make a list: body, health, spaces, right? Spaces are your home, your office, your car. There's a really famous coach by the name of Gary Bishop, and he sells this coach program online, and they spend a month on the car alone, just the integrity of your car alone, and just 12 areas. So you can start with your car. You can clean your car. And every time you get into your car, if it's filthy with coffee cups and maybe cigarette butts, whatever else all over it, and you've cleaned it or you've paid somebody to detail it, every single time you step up to that car, you're just going to go, heck yeah. And you're going to be happy with yourself, right? Like my life started being rebuilt by making my bed, literally. I got a question from Sven. What about if being in integrity with your relationships causes you to be in conflict with your career? How do you balance between the different areas? That occurs like a time conversation. That occurs like there's something regarding time that you're not utilizing to the max. And that would probably be a slightly bigger conversation. But a really good definition of a working definition from Deepak Chopra that I know is when you combine your attention with your intention. Because time is, believe it or not, it's malleable, right? So when I go surfing in the morning, 2 hours disappears and I have no idea what happened to it, right? And so Albert Einstein said, this might be getting too theoretical, but Albert Einstein said, if you spend a minute on a hot stove, it feels like an hour. And if you spend an hour with a pretty girl, it feels like a minute. And that's relativity. So when you you can say, I am going to complete this task in 1 hour. Like with my writing, I try to complete 500 words of writing in 1 hour, and I tweak it. I play with it, right? And I see if I can pull it off. And if you can pull it off, you start to discover new things about sort of the nature of it all. So does that answer your question, Sven? Happy to talk offline too. Excuse me. Still getting used to these technical issues. Oh, shoot, give me a second. Yeah. So just make a list, right? Like money is a big one. Like if you are in debt, sit down and stare that monster straight into the eye and create a plan to get out of debt versus being run by the terror of being in debt, right? Like if you call the IRS and you owe them money, they're extraordinarily friendly when you finally get some on the phone, right? Career, right? Like set an intention, upload some resumes, right? Spirituality is very open, but I personally think that if we have a God in our life, that relationship can always be nurtured and grown. And then, you know, purpose. What are you doing here? So you can pick each one of these areas if you want, and you just rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Where am I with my body? Well, if you're a 3, you're going to make yourself a promise to get up to a 7, 8, 9, or a 10. And that's kind of where we want to stay, 7, 8, 9, or 10. Right? So I really hope, I want to kind of start wrapping up, and I want to open up for questions. And, you know, if you'd like to book a call with me, I would love that. My calls are, it's complimentary. There's not really a big sales pitch at the end of them. Obviously, it's what I do for money, but it's just not the nature of how I work. Those who want to move forward, if you want to, we have that conversation. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. But really what we want to do is just unpack the state of your affairs, create awareness around where you are in and out, and then get clear on your goals for 2020, 2021, right? And really, uncover what your deepest longings are, and that might be empowering your current career. That might be creating a whole new career. That might mean creating that business that you've been thinking about. That might be writing that book that is inside of you. That might be starting that podcast. It could be all of it, right? So, I'd be honored if you wanted to book a call with me. You can, like I said, I'm honored to share my work with you. And then I'd like to really just sort of open this up for questions. You can hit me up at Magic Pisces or davekenius.com if you'd like to book a call. Just give me one sentence as to why you'd like to work with me or why you'd like to, why it would serve you to move forward. So I thank you all so much. And then Kevin, I'd like to kind of turn it back over to you.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions as we're just kind of winding down our program for this afternoon? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come through, but
I saw one. I got a couple.
Okay.
Any readings you might suggest? Kimberly, yeah, there's a book called, if you're looking for something objective, like more corporate-y, I would recommend The Last Word on Power by Tracy Goss, Goss. If you're looking for something spiritual, just a place to get started, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. Amazing book. There's a really good book about relationships called Getting Real, I would recommend. Yeah, and if anything comes to me, I'll shoot you an email. I'll let you know. Yeah. You're super welcome. Yes, Christopher, we can. We can definitely go through we can go through your entire existence. Absolutely. So feel free. I would love to connect. I'll shoot you an email. We'll figure that out. But yeah, I mean, really, it's really just hammering, it's just really hammering home the awareness around it that you can hang this thing up and things can change immediately. Yeah, Anna, thank you. I really appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you. This is very weird. I've never done something where I can't see the people. And so it's been this, like, Kevin and I had to partner to kind of figure it out. So next time I'll probably just do Zoom meetings, but yeah, I thank you all. And Kevin, again, thank you so much.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, Dave, definitely appreciate all of your insight and your wisdom. And thank you very much for being vulnerable with us and embracing this idea of doing something different and communicating to a community of people that you've not met before, that you in many ways haven't had a personal connection with, and looking us all in the eyes. And I appreciate you investing your time in this and helping us recognize that it's within all of us. And there are a lot of things happening around us, and we do want to contribute meaningfully, but it starts with understanding self and looking internally so that you can then contribute positively in so many other areas of your own personal and community life. So I really appreciate Dave. Just one last thing to thank Dave for his time. We asked him where we could make a charitable contribution on his behalf. And there's an organization that he's worked with in the past here in Chicago called Mercy Home. So we'll be making a donation in Dave's name to Mercy Home to thank him for his time and your contribution to the Catalyst community.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Mercy Home is amazing. Go check out. You can actually go there. I don't know if you can go there with COVID, but I've taken tours of that place. It's a really phenomenal organization that really does very, very, very good work on the planet.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us this evening. And we are going to continue to have regular webinar series coming up, so we'll keep you informed via our newsletter and then also kind of separate announcements as we're pulling together our total programming for the rest of the year. But Dave, thank you very much for kicking this off with us.
Yeah, man. My pleasure.
Everyone's welcome to reach out to Dave directly if they'd like to talk about anything else kind of in regards to their personal journeys directly. But thanks again to everyone for participating, and thanks for being a member of our community.
I'll catch you guys next time. Have a great day.
All right, take care.